Right here, we have Eduardo Esquivel, is Executive Director of Simple Homes and The Simple Way. Eduardo is a master's level social worker who has been working in Philadelphia since 2010. He has worked with people experiencing homelessness and in affordable housing for many years and is passionate about meeting the needs of those most vulnerable in Kensington neighborhoods and in the larger Philadelphia area. And in general, him and his wife are just amazing people, really kind and just big hearts who are helping people constantly and making people feel welcome and warm. So I'm really excited for you guys to get to hear what he has to say.
Thank you so much, Melissa. My instinct is to tell you all the wonderful things about this lady, but I think you all already know that stuff, so I'll spare you. I would love to start with a prayer and a praise if folks are okay. I realize you just came from all that, but never can have too much, especially in these crazy times. I want to say praise for everybody who helped me get this going, and also that it just kind of started working on its own after we had given up. So thank you, God. I seriously didn't do it. I literally hit the button and then all of a sudden it came up. So thank you, God. Appreciate that. Thank you, God, for you too, because you'll be able to see something that's not just my face the whole time. It'll be a little bit more exciting, and there's a nice video that I got for y'all. And then I'd just like to pray real quick. We have had the most incredible amount of violence in this world for months and weeks, but also just this last couple weeks has, I think, been hitting everybody. So just want to say a quick prayer. Please, God, thank you so much for having these folks here and for the chance to connect with each other. We pray that you help all of those impacted by the incredible violence that surrounds us right now, and that you help those who are impacted to heal and help us all to find a way through this. Thank you, amen. Thank you all so much for coming out. As Melissa said, my full name is Eduardo Esquivel. I grew up in Missouri. I go by Ed. Eduardo was a challenge in the community that I grew up in. So you can call me any of the above as long as it's not a four-letter thing, or just don't say it to my face. I am the executive director at Simple Homes and The Simple Way. Do folks know when I say The Simple Way? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Yeah!
45 years this week.
You beat me to it. This is wonderful. I love this. It is. So this is our anniversary week. We're very excited. And The Simple Way is an organization that got started in the Kensington neighborhood of Philadelphia way back in the 90s, which I was alive for. I think a lot of you were too, so I feel a little bit more, I'm used to being surrounded by teenagers who don't know what I'm talking about. There was a small group of students from Eastern University and from elsewhere that came to North Philadelphia in solidarity with some families who were holed up in an old Catholic church that had been decommissioned. The families were being told to leave. They didn't have anywhere to go. Philadelphia has a very broken homeless services system. That's a whole other conversation, but I'm happy to talk with anybody about it. But in the 90s, it just didn't exist in any functional sense, especially if you were not a single male. There just wasn't anything in terms of resources. Good luck. So they were holed up in this church because they had nowhere else to go. The Catholic Church, unfortunately, said, get out. The city said, get out. The people who were there said, we talked to the owner, God. He said we can stay here. And these students who were full of energy and all, and hope and dreams all showed up to help say, no, you're really not going to do this. I like to say they actually lent their privilege, because it was a group of mostly white folks who came in and said, you can't do this. And what actually happened is the city got shamed, because not only were they were willing to kick out all these families, but they knew that the press was going to be even worse now. So they came in, there were a whole bunch of other folks who came out in solidarity and managed to shame the Catholic Church and the city into saying, no, you can stay here. All those folks eventually got some placement in subsidized housing. So that's kind of what started The Simple Way. They then moved over to Kensington, right near the Kensington and Allegheny stop, if you know where I'm talking about. Totally okay if not. Usually when it hits the news, it's not in a pleasant way, though there are many, many beautiful things. If anyone wants to come visit, we'd love to have you out. We have an open house this upcoming Friday, but also I'm happy to schedule with anybody. So if you haven't signed up here, this is a great way to get me your info so I can send you stuff. I'm sending it through Mary, so it won't be me spamming you, it'll be Mary spamming you. So anyways. So that's kind of the history of The Simple Way. It's been this small organization that has been working in the Kensington neighborhood for 30 years, for a whole long time, has been doing its thing. We have been doing any number of services in the community. At first it was literally people living in the house, waiting for a knock at the door, as literally as that sounds. So they'd go to the door, someone said, I need food, they'd try to figure it out. Somebody said, I need housing, they'd try to figure it out. That happened from the late 90s all the way till 2011. As you can imagine, folks got pretty tired eventually of doing that. They needed to organize into a little bit of something more. And so a lot of the kind of initiatives that started from that have been kind of expanded out. So the Simple Way did youth programming and youth mentorship. That's now an organization called Timoteo that's right in the Hunting Park neighborhood of Philadelphia. They're wonderful. We actually still work with them to send one of their folks per year to Eastern University on a full scholarship. They won't cover room and board, we're trying. But at least they cover the full educational thing. There's another organization called, that was originally the housing arm of the Simple Way. Folks started to, when the Simple Way started, this whole street by us called Potter Street was about half vacant. Got donations, started buying the houses. Back then they were only like 5 or 10 grand. There wasn't much house there, but they rehabbed them, put renters in. After a while, the Simple Way found out that being somebody's landlord and their friend is a really hard balance, as I'm sure you can imagine. And so that kind of spun off a different program called Simple Homes, which is what I'm going to be talking the most about here. But I am, I think, contractually obligated to tell you about all the cool things that are happening. So we have the Simple Way, we have Simple Homes. Our founder, Shane Claiborne, has a really cool program called Raw Tools that's part of a larger national network that actually, if you've ever heard of turning swords into plowshares, they do the modern version of that. They take guns, they cut them up, and they make them into really cool things, sometimes literally garden tools, sometimes trinkets, sometimes all sorts of things, because we have an insane number of guns floating around. And they're doing things like advocating for, if police seize guns, that they don't then resell them, which is the most common practice in the country right now, which is insane, that they actually get them cut up and things like that. So got a lot of things. I'm not gonna be talking a bunch about those. If any of those piqued anybody's interest, I'm happy to speak more afterward. What I'm gonna be talking with you today about is the Simple Homes end of things. So I'm gonna kind of do a little bit of a side to side here. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about Simple Homes, then I'm gonna talk about the reason Simple Homes is there, and then I'm going to show you a video of one of our families that we just did as a fundraiser, and it can give you an idea of who we're working with. So Simple Homes is an organization, like I said, that came out of the Simple Way. Our big thing is home ownership. We want folks to have their own place. We don't want to be anybody's landlord. We pull from Millard Fuller's whole thing. He's the guy who started Habitat. He started a small organization whose curriculum we use and all that kind of stuff to actually get people into their own homes. So we buy vacant houses in the Kensington neighborhood for as cheap as we can get them. Shane talks about finding them for $1 back in the day. If anyone hears of a house for $1, I need you to tell me. Pretty pleased with sugar on top. There's not a finder's fee, but I will say thank you a whole bunch. They're usually closer to like 25 now, but it's still a pretty amazing deal. We managed to get the houses rehabbed for about 100 grand in total, including acquisition and all of those boring things. Then we sell that house to our folks for $55,000, 0% interest. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about why that's necessary, and then I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the program. I also tend to, this nice lady is my wife, she'll tell you, I tend to talk a lot, so please stop me at any point, please ask questions. There's no like designated question time. So if anyone has questions now, I'm gonna like stop for half a second and see. Then I'm gonna keep going. Any questions? Okay, guess I gotta tell you more before you have questions. So, this is gonna keep working, this is great. Okay, so, I don't think I have to tell anyone here, rent is too high. If you own your house, I bet you feel like your mortgage payment is too high or your insurance or something. Housing in this country is insanely expensive right now. It's not a normal thing. This is not how it's been historically. I think there are probably folks in here who remember when housing was one part of your costs, not the major part of your costs. That's not the case anymore. It's the thing that takes the most of people's income at this point. And that actually it didn't start in 2008, but 2008, which I think folks probably remember here, was one of the big turning points for our country. So in 2008, I don't have to tell everybody, there was a major housing crisis, people fell through on their mortgages, a whole bunch of hedge funds and other folks came through and bought up a bunch of houses. That didn't help us out, but also all the construction industries and everybody else that were booming at that time, the bottom fell out. They built too many houses, or they built a lot of houses, too many for people to be able to afford at that moment, usually a lot of bigger houses, and people just left the industry. They went to do other things. I'm sure folks have stories of a friend who worked in construction in the aughts and now is doing anything else. But essentially we just didn't build from 2008. Even until now, we are not building as we did back then, especially smaller homes by smaller, I mean a 3-bedroom. I'm in Philly, so that sounds huge to me, but smaller than like the 5-bedroom, the really, really big houses out there. Building of new housing units functionally stopped for a long time. As that has increased, as that has kept going, we've never made our way out of that hole. Philly has been adding rental units for years now. Most of them are on the high end. That's not necessarily a terrible thing. Those eventually filter down to people at the lower income range. But those folks need somewhere to go right now, and they do not have it. And we are not building housing at a pace that will actually meet the needs of those folks. I'm trying to see here. So rents in everywhere, I don't have to tell you folks, have gone up in the last several years, in the last decade. It's been a consistent thing. Rents in Philadelphia have actually gone up much faster. There's a lot of folks who are coming to Philadelphia. A lot of folks, frankly, not to call them out, but a lot of folks in Brooklyn saw a thing on Philadelphia, looked at the house prices and said, my God, I can buy a house and afford to buy another one on top of it based on how much I usually spend in a given year. There's a lot of folks have been more interested in living in the city, so that has put a lot of pressure on folks who are currently living in the city. Philadelphia competes at any given time with Houston for being the poorest of the biggest cities in the country. We have a rate of deep poverty that is absolutely huge. So folks who are living at $25,000 a month or less for an entire family, it's a huge number of people. There's a huge number of people living on like $12,000 or less. That's not, I don't have to tell y'all, that's not enough to make your basic payments, that's not enough to make rent, that's not enough to make almost anything. And part of the problem here is that incomes have not kept pace with us. So this actually just hit the news recently. Our minimum wage in Pennsylvania is still $7.25 an hour. That is not something that your average person gets paid. Like a lot of folks get paid more than that. They're still not getting paid enough to keep pace with inflation or to be able to keep up with anything. There's a stat on here, yes, that's on here that it just came out with this. If folks literally made that $7.25 an hour, 2 people working as hard as they can, they would each need to work 96 hours a week, not between them, each of them, to be able to afford a 3-bedroom in Philly at the medium. That's not an expensive place, that's not like a fancy place, that's just a 3-bedroom that's in fine enough condition. So our incomes are not keeping pace, and a lot of folks are what's called cost burdened or rent burdened, if you've heard this term. Basically, the sweet spot, as researchers have found it over the last several decades, is we want to, as people, we want to spend 30% or less of our income on housing. If you're spending more than that, you might be making it. You might be making all your payments, you might be current, but you're going to be stressed. And again, I don't think this is something that is just for folks who are living in poverty or just living in the city. I think any of us can feel that same pinch of like, oh my gosh, why is my mortgage, why is my rent, why is my any of this continue to go up and up? So it's not something that's unique to people in deep poverty, but it is especially bad for them because of the consequences of that. So this is where it gets real bad. So if you can't afford to pay rent, you are at risk of eviction. If you don't pay rent by the 5th of the month, with most landlords, they can file for eviction immediately. Each state has different laws. Happy to talk with somebody about that. I love nerding out about that, but I'm not going to go super into that today. That inability to afford rent is just looming over people for everything. So if you have a medical bill, if you have your car breaks down, if you're like me and you really need to get your oil changed and you haven't yet, and that actually turns into some major problem, I will get it done, I swear. Then you're facing just a $1,000 bill. 40% of people in the country surveyed said they can't cover that $1,000 bill. That's not people in deep poverty. That's not people who are struggling in the way that I'm talking about in Philly. That's just your average human being. For our folks in Philly, it's even worse. They don't have any kind of savings like that. They don't necessarily even have a network to draw on to get that much money. This means that everybody's one major incident away from being evicted. Has anyone heard of the book Evicted? I believe is the actual name of it. Awesome. So they call it the Scarlet E, right? If you've heard of the Scarlet Letter, the Scarlet E. When you get an eviction on your record, it is as bad as that one time you had a credit card as a teenager and you spent too much times a trillion. That thing stays on your record. Any landlord can look that up if they so choose, unless they're not allowed to by state law, which, again, anyone who wants to nerd out about that, I'm happy to, but that's a whole different thing. Most landlords, if you look at the listings, they'll even say it. No evictions, credit score 650 or above, must make 3 times the rent in income. Almost any listing you look on Zillow, on apartments.com, any of them, they're gonna list that. First thing is no evictions. So what do you do if you've been evicted? You end up in a really terrible area of not the formal rental market. You end up in the market of landlords who are willing to work with you who don't have. Usually that means you're in not necessarily slum conditions, but you're not in a good place. You may be having serious issues with maintenance in the apartment. You may have mold, you may have leaks, you may have systems that don't work. You also have very little recourse of what to do if the landlord says, I don't feel like it, because you have no access to the regular market. You can't just go on Zillow and find a place. It gets even worse, unfortunately. I promise there's a cool side of this, but I'm gonna be telling you a bunch of like sad stuff before that. For folks who just can't afford it and they can't find a place. So let's say you tried to find even a slummy place, a place that is terrible. You can't find that either. Your options at that point as a family especially are really dire. We have shelters in the city of Philadelphia. I know they have them in Camden, they have them in Jersey, all over. They are primarily for single individuals, single adults, men and women, primarily men, which is the largest homeless population, but doesn't cover most folks. So for single adults, those shelters are often at capacity. For families, they are permanently at capacity. If you get in, it's like you won the lottery. Most folks, if you go to the city and say, I need help, I got kicked out of my place, I don't know where to go, they will send you to Salvation Army. We're grateful to them. They give a 2-week voucher to a motel, which is wonderful. It's helpful in that moment. And I don't mean to disparage it in any way, but after that, that's it. There is no alternative. There are a couple family shelters in the city where mom and dad and kids can be. They are very rare, and there's a list, and if you do anything wrong in those, you're kicked out almost immediately. And as you can imagine, I don't know about y'all, I like living with my wife and my dog and my cat, and that's really all I want to live with. If you're already stressed, you've been kicked out of your place, and you're bundled up right next to, I have this space over here, another room would be in that space over there. If you have another whole family that is that stressed, a lot of conflict can happen. A lot of things can, it doesn't take much, and the ways that folks get kicked out of these happen very quickly. I worked in homeless services in the city for a lot of years, saw people kicked out for almost nothing or for real incidents that happened, but they happened because people were clearly traumatized and stressed and were just overwhelmed. So those options are extremely limited. What folks do if they can't do that is they have to split up their families temporarily. So usually folks send the kids to family if they'll take them. Sometimes they can't even take all the kids. They split the kids up across different households. Mom and dad will go to shelters, usually separate shelters. So mom goes to the female shelter, dad goes to the male shelter. And that introduces an incredible amount of chaos, even on top of what this poor family was already experiencing, dealing with poverty, dealing with whatever major emergency got them to this. This can also lead to folks doubling up. There was a really terrible fire in 2022. I don't know if y'all saw this, it was in the Inquirer, where a family was in the Fairmount neighborhood of Philadelphia, fairly affluent neighborhood now. There were 3 families stuffed into a space meant for one family. They had disabled the smoke alarms because I'm sure they were going off every 2 seconds because they were cooking, and y'all have done this before. Somebody pulled the smoke alarm off, some poor little boy played with matches like little boys sometimes do, caused an awful fire, and it killed a huge number of the family members. The reason all those people were in there is because they were tripled up, because they didn't have anywhere else to go, and somebody said, please, I have nowhere else to go, and the family that was there said yes, twice. They actually are in violation of they were in a subsidized unit, they were actually in violation of their lease for that. They can actually get kicked out for being nice in those circumstances, but they were willing to do it, but it can end in tragedy. These are the circumstances our folks are facing. What started all of this was they missed a rent payment because something happened. The engine fell out of the car, whatever it may be. There was a medical emergency. So you'd hope that folks would go into public housing. I was just having a nice conversation with this nice gentleman about this. We used to build public housing in this country. We live down the street actually from one of the earliest developments in the city is in Juniata Park. We used to build those. We used to build them nicely. They got a very bad reputation. I would argue primarily because they were not maintained. If you build a 20-story building, you have to maintain it. If you don't maintain the trash chute, then you're gonna have problems very quickly and other things. in the racialized and I think anti-poverty lens that unfortunately does course through this country at times. That was seen as, not as we need to maintain these places, but oh, these people don't appreciate this, they don't want this, they can't take care of things. And so we started to demolish those. Starting in the 80s, starting in the 90s, we started demolishing public housing faster than we replaced it. All those folks were told, or almost all, were told that they were going to get a housing choice voucher or a Section 8 voucher. You're gonna hear a lot of words, we're talking all about the same thing. That didn't always materialize, or if it did, those folks could easily get kicked out of that for, again, one rule break. Maybe they let a family member stay for a month and then they get kicked out too. But we've been destroying public housing faster than we've been creating it, to the point that out of everybody who qualifies for public housing right now in this country, 10% of the people who qualify actually get any help. So that's, you know, I can measure my own success on certain things in certain ways. If I am failing 90% of the time, probably not doing a great job. So that's literally the majority of people who need this help just aren't getting it. There is no recourse. There are shelters and other things, that's it. There's a wait list in Philadelphia. I think this changes based on various places, so I'm gonna be speaking about Philadelphia, but this could be very different in Morristown and other places. In Philadelphia, the wait list for the Section 8 vouchers or housing choice vouchers, I'm just gonna use those interchangeably, opens up once every 5 to 8 years. It is closed the vast majority of the time, and if you're lucky enough to be on the wait list, it's a mad dash when they do open it up. You wait about 10 years or more. We had somebody, actually a neighbor of ours at the from the Simple Way, who waited 14 years. She was very happy to get the unit when she was done, but she kind of needed it those 14 years before too, and legally qualified for it. Please.
I was gonna say, we've been through the housing choice voucher process. And one of the problems too is even if you get a voucher, they give you a certain amount of time to find a unit. You won't believe the amount of financial discrimination that goes on against, housing choice vouchers.
Amen.
A lot of apartments will not even take into account the monthly value of that voucher to count it towards a person's income. So even if you do get a voucher, you're limited, your choices are very limited.
Absolutely, and they will not get rid of these like periods of time. They say 30 days, 90
30
days.
days.
And
60 days, yeah.
I think it's pretty hard to do that in a marketplace,
It's
right? Like
it's a lot of stress.
when we were looking for our house that we live in now, it took us more than 30 days, and we are, I'm not like rolling in it, but I have enough money to get a house and things like that. So no, very well said and very well taken. And also that is discrimination. Like,
It is.
and it's illegal, and they still functionally get away with it.
They do.
Here, Philadelphia, there are no consequences in any meaningful way. Please.
So, Morristown has a long history with affordable housing. They actually opened their first affordable housing unit, which is half a mile from here, at Harper Road. There were 75 units for what's called low income.
Yeah.
There were 4,000 applicants.
It seems right. It seems right. Thank you for saying that. I think it can feel invisible sometimes if you don't see people out, if you don't see people at the stoplight asking for money or whatever it may be, it can feel very invisible. Those folks are still there. Those folks are still looking for it. Amen. Thank you so much for sharing it. Thank you both. So not just a distant Philadelphia thing, right? It's not really that distant, but so absolutely. Again, I will get to some good news here at the end, but I have a little bit more bad news. So that is where, so I could have given this a year ago, the same talk, and it would have been very accurate. The rent prices have finally stabilized, even though it used to be, we'd rent a 2-bedroom house in Kensington for about $650, $700. That amount now is more like $1,200, $1,300. That is still going up. That is with, if you've seen the news, if you've been, the same conditions that folks were dealing with a couple, 3 years ago are the same conditions in Kensington now. There's still the same really difficult things in the drug market and everything that makes it so those rents keep rising even as the quality of life has not increased or changed in any way. We are now in an era where the current administration is wanting to drastically change the way that we spend funds. So There's the Department of Housing and Urban Development. This is another tangent that I will not go on, but happy to talk with anybody afterward. Has been an organization in our government that historically gets appointees that are mostly there because they did something nice. That is Democratic and Republican. That doesn't it generally is just a neglected organization. Since the first Trump administration, they've been interested in overhauling the way things go. Of the budget that they put out in what's called the continuum of care, there's no quiz at the end of this, 90% of the current funds from that budget go to housing or subsidized housing of some kind. We've, over the years, figured out that shelter is extremely expensive. Another place that homeless folks end up, jail, is extremely expensive. What's really cheap is putting people in housing and just letting them live their lives by comparison to those other things. So 90% of the funding currently goes there. The administration wants to cut that to 30%. That is not going to stop people from getting into well, it will. It will stop people getting into subsidized housing, but that is 60% of that funding that is currently going to people who are currently housed. There is the potential during this administration for tens of thousands, there's 170,000 people in this housing right now. There's the possibility of tens of thousands of people being put back on the streets after they've been in an apartment, after they've been doing well. I worked at an organization called Pathways to Housing and another one called Resources for Human Development, working with folks who are experiencing homelessness. These, frankly, are people I know. These are faces in my brain. These are people with histories, with lives, many of whom have stabilized and are doing amazing in their housing. Like people who, because they're in housing, can now go to work, can get sober, can get their mental health in order, can reconnect with their families who are in danger of being out on the streets again. So it's a really dire thing that you're gonna see this hit the news. If any of this sounds awful to you, please tell your congressperson. Everybody here has a U.S. House representative and 2 senators, and y'all are actually doing better on this side of the river than we are. So please let them know. We need them to be arguing for this. That is that.
Can I just ask you one question?
Please do.
Another change in policy is, for a long time, housing first was the mantra. This administration is pushing back against that.
Yes.
What's your feelings on that?
I think it's extremely misguided. I think, having worked in homeless services, I think we often talk about homelessness as, so what's the problem with homelessness? How do we fix homelessness? The reality is there's a bunch of different stuff there. If you were to go back to the 70s where or let's say the 80s, that would be a little easier, when housing prices weren't skyrocketing, there were still some folks who had been lost in the shuffle of deinstitutionalization, coming out of those awful old mental health asylums, but who had not gotten the community care that they were supposed to, because those funds were cut by Ronald Reagan. It is what it is. But those folks needed specific assistance. At Pathways to Housing, those are the folks we were helping. Often they were people who had been homeless for decades. It was that guy you saw at the corner of 13th and Locust for like literal years and years and years and years. For those folks, housing first is absolutely necessary. We need it. In terms of like the larger thing, there's just nothing that they're proposing to me that makes any sense. Even if you're saying you want to save money, shelter is one of the most expensive ways to do it. If you've heard any of the statistics on jail is one of the most expensive ways to have somebody with a roof over their head. In the city, it's $45,000 a year, which is more than enough to have a nice apartment and to just live your life. For shelters, it's the same thing. It's absolutely the most expensive way you can have a roof over someone's head. So if you just take all the morality, all the spirit, anything out of it, it's just financially exclusion.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're gonna, also, where they're going to put the extra shelter facilities, I would be very hard to do. It's very hard to site a shelter. People don't want shelters next to them. That, again, that's a whole different discussion, but it's very hard to get them. The last one that the city cited was on prison property because literally people can't say no to it. They don't have the ability to push back against it. So if they're trying to massively increase the shelter system, I would ask where are you going to put
New
them?
Greyhound station.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's what they used it as for. It's why people got upset. And yeah, no, it's. I mean, full disclosure, I think it's a terrible idea. I think it has terrible effects for the people who are in that housing. I also think, again, if you had no connection, if you don't care about anybody else in the world except for yourself, there are going to be people who living like that who are going to be very upset because they're going to see a bunch of people out on the streets who, if put me on the street and made me live in this weather outside right now, there's a good chance I would end up engaging in some survival behaviors that weren't good, right? You're gonna have people who fall back into substance use. You're gonna have like people whose mental health gets much worse. It's really hard to maintain your medications and make sure that you're taking what you need if you're living on the street. So because of all of that, I think it's a terrible idea. I could do like a 2-hour spiel, and again, anyone wants to stay for that.
It's just, you know, you hear about it all the time. We,
Oh.
you know, it's like, we're not doing housing first, kind of thing, you know, that's basic.
It's a terrible idea. It's a truly terrible idea. It doesn't help anybody, and people will be, even the people who don't care about the people who are about to lose their housing and have their lives flipped are gonna be upset about the consequences, so just bad. Thank you for that question.
Well, and then the way they do this is through administrative hoops. You know,
Yes.
you don't do this paper at this time, you know, basically you're out. You know? Or
Exactly.
you don't produce proof of work, or, you know, all these things.
Right, so they're doing that, especially with like, with SNAP, with food stamps, SNAP benefits is what we call them, but with SNAP benefits, with Medicaid, all of these things, that's what they're trying to
These
do.
are people that don't have access to computers,
Exactly.
you know, maybe not a cell phone.
And you can't take days off to sit in an office so someone can assist you.
No.
Yeah, poor
I-
people are treated very poorly.
I benefited from a very good education growing up. I'm master's level educated. The welfare form in Philadelphia for getting food stamps, Medicaid, any of it is pretty complicated.
Yes.
It took me a lot of training to get through it. I had a cheat sheet for my case managers that I would train. Don't answer this question. It's just gonna make your life harder. They ask about your assets. Oh, I put that I sort of have a car, but it doesn't work. Okay, you need to provide us proof of that car, and you need to provide us proof of the value of it, and you need to do every single hurdle gets in the way of, it's just food. We can talk about the local benefits to grocery stores, the local community, all of it, but it's just silly and not productive and frankly cruel. I think is unfortunately part of what they're going for. I promise you that there would be an upside. I'm a little biased on this upside, mind you. So I talked a little bit about this. We try to work with the folks in Kensington who tell me that's still not affordable to me. So we work with folks who are at 25, at Simple Homes, I kind of did a little jump there. We work with folks who are making between 25 and 50% of Philadelphia's area median income. No quiz at the end of this, but that's not the general median income of the larger area. That would include Montgomery County, that includes part of Jersey, that includes a whole lot of places that make a lot more money than the city of Philadelphia does. So all that means, I put a little cheat sheet on here, that's $12,000 to $30,000 per year. So this is what our families are making. The majority end up being either young couples or single moms raising their kids who are working and who are working very hard, but cannot afford to even make basic rent. At this amount, you are back in that boat that we were talking about of one major event can make it so that you are homeless. I'm gonna show you a video of a young woman who works full-time, actually a little bit more than full-time, who we're working with now, who has been doubled up in her parents' house. She's actually one of the lucky ones. She has a parents' house to go to that sort of has enough space. That means that she and both her kids, a boy and a girl, are all in one bedroom, which is working out right now. Those kids are young enough that it's okay, but it's not going to obviously be as she gets older. So she's honestly one of the lucky ones. A lot of folks aren't that lucky. They end up in the streets, they end up tripled up, they end up in all these awful places. But these are folks who are working, they are getting an income. Already did that. So we get vacant houses, I think I was telling you, we get vacant houses in the city, in the Kensington neighborhood. We do still have a fair amount of those floating around. Right now, we're actually working on a cache of houses that was held by a speculator. He had gotten himself about 1,000 different properties, houses, vacant lots, all sorts of stuff. He sold them to a developer. The developer kept some of them. They sold it. They gave it to a nonprofit company called Impact Services Community Development Corporation. Again, no quizzes. Who is a good partner of ours, and they've been getting us these houses that have been sitting for 20 plus years, just sitting there.
Wow.
As we have a growing housing crisis, this nice gentleman was just saying, I don't feel like it. I'm just going to wait until I can cash out. So it's been a blessing to get to rehab those finally, and to finally put some people in them because they've just been sitting. Our folks, when they come in the program, this is a very similar program to Habitat for Humanity. So there's going to be some things that sound very similar. We're kind of like old school Habitat essentially. So our folks put in work. They put in 350 hours of sweat equity. That's literally them. They're putting up drywall. They're putting up framing. We can't do plumbing and electric because the city of Philadelphia says so. But they're cleaning out trash. They're doing all sorts of stuff. If somebody applies, and I can get anybody here an application if you know somebody who needs one, and they physically can't do that stuff, they still do 350 hours, but we find volunteer work that matches that. So if somebody's physically incapable, we got lots of volunteer hours that we can get them to do this. We fundraise to cover the costs of all of this. So we fundraise all the money ahead of time to get folks into this place. We bring in plumbers and electricians, HVAC specialists. Again, the city has some very strict ideas of who can and can't do that work. There are places, I think Jersey is one of them, where you can actually do the work and then you can call and say, please come on, take a look, tell me if I did it right. Philly is not that, so the costs go up, unfortunately. We fundraise to cover that. We didn't sell them, the family, the home for 55 grand. It was 35 grand for a long time. We're trying to meet trying to match the current thing. It's 0% interest. That's biblical. We believe that God calls us not to burden our neighbors who are already struggling with additional burdens. So we charge 0% interest. That means they're not putting anything towards interest. It's just towards principal and towards the cost of insurance and things like that.
So for how long, 30 years, or like a traditional mortgage?
I love that question. So we set the amount that they pay each month based on their income. So they agree to pay a certain amount. Generally, it ends up being $500 a month. So it's a 30-year mortgage, but as long as someone's on track, they finish the mortgage in 15 years. And I like that because I don't really want to have it on the books for 30 years, but also when the price is that low, there's, if somebody gets a little extra money and they're able to put it in, I would like it to be their asset as quickly as possible, because then they can start doing the thing that the rest of us get to do, which is have the house. You build equity in it, and you have an ability to help to meet those needs then of like, oh my God, the crazy medical emergency, oh my God, the engine fell out of the car, or whatever it is. But really good question. Technically, they have a full 30 years. I'm a social worker by trade. I am also essentially a mortgage lender because of the role that I'm in, and I would like to say I'm the nicest mortgage lender I've ever met. So if somebody needed 31 years, we could do it. Like, I'm not gonna kick somebody out. I would probably be having a conversation on like, what's happened? Because we made it this low just to make sure you could make it, because we want them to have that house. We want that to be their asset. We want that to be in their hands.
Do you put limitations on them, so when they acquire this house, do you allow them to let other people move into their house, or do you have strict limitation that the same thing as, HUD does, no more than, I think it just went to 60 days visitation, but.
Great. You are an expert on this. I need to pick both of your brains. We're into the nitty gritty. No, good question. And the joy is it's their house. They can have as many people as they want. At some point it's between them and the fire marshal, but no one's gonna be. So that is an advantage too. We've had folks who've gone in and then their uncle also has a place to go. And their nephew also has a place to go when something happened. And then we've seen folks do that. So no kind of strictures whatsoever. It is their house. It is a normal mortgage. We do have one clause in that we're going to start doing that most of the subsidiaries of Fuller Center do, that we're kind of connected with, where folks have kind of a trial year just to get them in the swing of things. If you've been living paycheck to paycheck and you've been evicted and you've been through all of this, getting back into a really structured and ordered bill pay process can be a little bit. So we have our folks go through housing counseling, but also we have financial counseling available, because there's really good studies to show that we don't need to talk about today, the effects of poverty on your brain and how much it makes it hard to just have if you were living and you have enough money, it changes your brain from that to a different kind of state that from the outside looks like, man, that person's really bad with money. It's like, no, they're very traumatized. And they've been traumatized for long enough that it's had a long-term impact. So, any other questions? Again, I do get going, so please feel free. Okay. So we sell to it for $55,000. We hold the mortgage, so credit is almost never an issue. The only thing that we would ever stop someone for is if they have such a big debt that as soon as they get the house, that the creditor could come and could take the house from them. We don't want anyone to put all of this energy and time in to have the house just taken by some random creditor. So that's the only circumstance in which we'd be an issue. And like I was saying, it's about $500 a month that folks tend to pay. We work with folks who are interested in coming to Kensington. That's another one of the requirements. All of our houses currently are in Kensington. We may change that as time goes on, but right now they're all centered there. But this is our program that's trying to like meet that need. So there are a lot of others. Happy to speak with folks about that. Any questions on that? Because my next bit is actually a video.
What's the population of Kensington right now?
In terms of raw numbers,
It is the most children of any neighborhood in Philadelphia.
yeah, yeah.
According to the 2020 census.
Yeah, in terms of, thank you. So in terms of raw numbers, I actually don't have it, but I gave you, I like every percentage you could ever ask for and then some. Yeah, it's, I can tell you the demographics, it's around a third, and a third. It's about a third, 33% Latino population, 33% African American, and about 33% white. The stats here are really hard. You have to have somebody who really wants to do it, because usually they go by zip code, and our zip code is split with a neighborhood called Port Richmond that is not like rich, but it is certainly doing better than most of Kensington is. So it throws off a lot of our stats when we're trying to get these, but yeah,
My
please.
son lives in East Kensington, and there's
Yeah.
a distinction between East Kensington and Kensington as well. There's certainly things in the news about Kensington.
Yes.
I wonder if you might comment on that.
Absolutely, yeah. So it is a very confusing thing to see from the outside if you don't know where they're talking about. East Kensington is hilariously south of the part of Kensington that I'm in, just to make it real fun. The neighborhood Kensington, I'm not gonna bore anyone with this, but I have if we get a map out here, I have very specific ideas of where it starts and ends. That's like a historic denomination. When people say Kensington in a bad way, they usually mean Kensington in Somerset, Kensington in Allegheny, and the nearby, so we can track it by the L stops. Again, if anyone wants me to pull out a map, I can show you, but that's, if you're seeing all of the who shot who on the news, what awful thing happened, what drug, what that, that's usually where they're talking about. It can also refer to, they call it South or Old Kensington, which is functionally just by Fishtown. I'm pretty sure folks have heard of that here. So it's functionally right next to Fishtown. It is very affluent. There was almost, most of the housing had been destroyed over the years, and now they're building huge condos. So if you hear of something in South Kensington, you can, sometimes when you hear it on the news, it's like, oh, that's great, they're bringing this cool thing. A lot of times that is functionally Northern Liberties, if anyone knows where I'm talking about. You're one block up for Northern Liberties. We love it. I might want to go to that bar and say, and get that fancy sandwich or whatever. But it's not the part of the population that we're dealing with. We're really up by, our organization is one block from Kensington and Allegheny, KNA, they would call it. And that's where the majority of what you hear on the news that's not positive comes out of. I will say, as somebody who lived there for a lot of years and who lives very, very close now, there's a lot that happens there. Some of the most amazing neighbors and some of the most amazing folks I've ever met in my life that are there. Our neighbor Carmen would not stop bringing us dinner. Like every other day, she would just call and be like, "Get comida," and hands over this amazing plate, rice and beans and alcapurria and all these things that were just spectacular. The community there is beautiful, and you're kind of going through so much together that it bonds you really closely. So these are folks who I would call in the craziest of emergencies still, even though I don't live right next door to them. I think that really gets lost in the news coverage, which makes me upset. But yeah, thank you for giving me that opportunity to share. There's a lot of cool things. If anyone wants to come visit, I have so many good restaurants to tell you about. We have some of the best food in the city. You just don't hear about it when folks are talking about the neighborhood. Any other questions on any of that? I wanted to share a video that is that family that I told you about, and then I have time for questions afterward too. Yeah, no, I'm doing it. Okay, we're gonna see if this works.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that let's try it this way. Okay. The technology strikes again. Here we go.
Here in Kensington, there are houses like this one all over.
It's more of my voice, sorry.
Forgotten. But in Simple Homes, we don't believe a house should stay that way. We believe every hardworking family deserves a place to belong. So we partner with families, and together, we turn these houses into homes.
Now I'm staying with my mom and her husband. It's a bit residential, and when I figured out that it was a 3-bedroom, that hit the spot right there, and I was like, yes, this is for me, this is for my kids.
When I first seen the house, I thought of it like if we fixed it up really nicely, it could have been like a really good house. Oh, I just want to get a gaming poster. Really one of our sisters' room. Want to get stuff in our closet.
It means everything to me. It's excitement, it's joy, a little bit of everything.
Families like Amanda's are working hard to build stability, but the housing market keeps moving out of reach. That's why Simple Homes exists. We don't rehab houses for families, we rehab houses with families. Every family we partner with commits over 350 hours of work on their house. We bring in the licensed pros for the heavy electrical and plumbing, but this is a true partnership, start to finish. When the work is done, we sell them the house for $55,000 at 0% interest. No predatory debt, no fine print, just a fair path to ownership for people who are putting in the work. We've raised $25,000 for Amanda's house already, and we need your help to raise $50,000 more that'll get us over the finish line. With your help, Amanda and her kids won't just receive a home, they'll finish building it with us, and they'll walk through that door as homeowners.
Oh, no, that's not what I wanted to do at all.
Here in Kensington, there are
Oh,
houses
sorry,
like this
y'all.
one all over.
It's no fun if I don't have a technology moment amidst all of this, so. That is not a shameless plug. We were actually able to fundraise for Amanda's house. We are always fundraising, so that is a shameless plug. If anyone is interested, I'm just gonna tell you a little bit, then I wanna just do questions. If anyone is like heard this and is passionate and interested in coming out, we have a lot of ways to participate and to help. There's a lot of things to get involved in, so if you're like, what you're doing is cool, but I wanna know, like, I wanna connect with something different, I'm always happy to connect you with like the larger forces happening. There's an organization called the Philly Coalition for Affordable Communities, I win the acronym game today, that is fighting to make sure that the funds that we do spend in Philly are going to those most in need. There's a bunch happening. If you're interested in what we do specifically out of this, we always welcome money, obviously, but we welcome more than that. We love to have folks come out. If you're one of those crazy people like me that like saw that house and you're like kind of excited, like all the dusty and gross and seeing all the scary electric hanging was like, yeah, please come on out. We get these houses, they may not have been formally inhabited, but somebody's been in there at some point in the last few years, and there's we do clean outs. If you are somebody who loves to do work with this, or you know somebody who loves to do that, we love our retired folks especially because they have all these skills and they got all this energy and they're ready to go. But anybody, we love to have skilled volunteers. We also just love to have folks who are passionate. So if you're interested in coming out and helping in these, we do clean outs, we do cleanups. We have an event coming up on Martin Luther King Day this year to actually help one of our current homeowners who's not pictured in this one, who could definitely use the help. Usually our folks get help from like family and friends, and he has a very limited set of family and friends to be able to pull from, and his wife and his kids are all just very busy as it is, so he's been soloing it in there, and he's it helps to have a buddy. So if any of this sounds exciting, please come on out. This is not, you don't need to have had experience, you don't need to be gung-ho about it in any particular way. If you're interested, I'd love to talk with you. And if you're like, that doesn't sound like fun, but I still want to help, I love to brainstorm. Also, we have lots of volunteer opportunities with The Simple Way, with Raw Tools, that's the one where we cut up guns. There's just a lot of stuff happening. So if any of this piqued your interest, please come tell me. Please come sign up on this sign-up sheet here. Again, I'll be spamming Mary, and then she can decide what should get to y'all. But in general, just would love to work with any one of y'all on doing this. We have, after this house, we have 2 houses that we just got that I would like to get started on as soon as possible. The sooner that we can get funds together, the sooner we can get them cleaned out, the sooner we can get a family into them who currently is doubled up, tripled up in a shelter in an awful situation and get them into their own home. So I'm ready for questions, comments, anything. I also I don't know how close on time we are, so also might be ready to get the crook out the door depending on what Mary tells me here.
Any more questions?
I just want to say, of all the things you said, the affordable housing word synonymous with Section 8, which is synonymous, well identified, talked about. I've been in hundreds of meetings, because I was vice chair of the planning board here, and I was on council, and we went through from years of talking about affordable housing, of this idea that Section 8, quote, housing is synonymous with terrible things happening to your community, because the stories that you just personally told about the persons that were in your community, which is, maybe a lower income community, but to me that, and I won't use the word case study, so it's
Sure.
but it's the human story that to me would be really great kind of to have half of whatever presentation everybody gives, to understand that this quote Section 8, which has a lot of terrible movies about what happens in low, that story really needs to be told and told again to get the people's mind that, gee, if I have a little money, I'm gonna go invest in this neighborhood. Over here, there might be X thing, or there's an affordable housing community. That would be a kind of a societal solve that we really need. I have talked to people who are of every hue, of every race, and oh, Section 8 housing, we don't want that there.
Right.
We're talking about our own affordable housing in this town, which actually has so many levels of making sure, like you were talking about, making sure that people must have income. People were going to be more than a thing. They were going to be people who were handicapped, people who were blind, people who were older, people who were younger, who couldn't afford to, all of those things. So the stories, I don't know if you have some kind of way to do that. It's just a thought I had. Because this Section 8, it's some terrible acts in all these meetings.
Oh, I hear you. I appreciate you saying that. That's really helpful. I'm a social worker, I'm a little biased, but I say this as honestly as I can. Amanda and her kids are the average person in the system, and any bit to which, I don't think I have to preach that to y'all here, I think you're probably on the same page, but to anyone you're talking with, I'm happy to send this video to anybody if they want to. I think there's a lot of other really good examples. This is the average person. The caricature that folks will paint of, sorry for the language, but this is what the Ronald Reagan administration, the black welfare queen, and all of that, like, this is what they wanted to create to scare people. That is, there are people in Section 8 housing who are not good neighbors. There are people on my block who are market renters who are not great neighbors. I'm about to get a recycle bin for one of them because I'm like, I'm tired. It'd be way easier if you could put it in your recycle bin and you clean it up rather than me cleaning up each individual piece. There are people who are not gonna do a great job. Just most of them are Amanda. They want nothing more than to have a roof over their heads. They are gonna be great neighbors to anybody that they're around. I would go so far at this point though to say that like Section 8, housing choice vouchers, they'll change the name 100 times and then we'll keep changing the name and keep chasing that. But right now the crisis is hitting so many just regular people, like people who are not in deep poverty, people that I think right now, if anyone came out of here or somebody was like, what should I do in my own town? I would say, if they say they're making a big apartment complex, listen for 15 more minutes than you were going to on whether you think it's a good idea. Because most of what we need are, they call them starter homes. We used to just call them homes. Like in the 70s, that was just a house. A 3-bedroom house was just a normal thing. We need folks to build these. This is part of the larger picture. We need affordable housing for people in deep poverty right now, but we just need housing. We need housing that is not giant mansions that, those are great if somebody wants to have them. I'm not gonna say anything about that, but like we need more houses that are just for your average person. And a lot of times when you've already built up everything, the way that you get that is through apartment buildings. And I think people get scared. What will that mean? What will it mean for traffic? What will it mean for the way the neighborhood works? And I would encourage folks, and please encourage other folks if this resonates with you, take 15 more minutes and just like look at what they're offering. that could do so much to help with this crisis right now, because literally in terms of units, we just need more housing in places that people live. Back where I'm from in Missouri, they are finally building apartment buildings, and I'm like jumping and screaming for the roof. And there's some of the rural areas in Missouri, there's plenty of houses, no one lives there anymore. So we have enough houses, but we don't have houses where people actually want to live right now, and that's a big problem.
Glad you said that, because it made me think of what we talked about. It's the reality. The people who live in this housing are the ones that take care of your kids.
Yes.
That are in the medical professions.
Yes.
That are firefighters, that are the police, younger people. These are people that are the roots of the community.
Amen, amen. And you really want your firefighters to have a short commute to their job and to be in really good condition when they get there, as opposed to driving from who knows where an hour and a half away because they can't afford a place in town. You want your police officers to do that, you want your EMS workers, you want your teachers, all of these folks are getting priced out. We're not doing as bad as like California or Portland or these other places that like have it a lot worse. That's what it will turn into if we don't allow more construction. And yeah, so.
I just mention
Please.
one thing.
Please,
So
yeah.
in New Jersey, they had a moratorium on housing after during the Christie administration.
Okay.
But since then, Fair Share Housing went back to court and took all the municipalities to court, and they have to build a certain number of houses. So I think the towns do set aside certain buildings within those apartment complexes for people to apply, you know, for affordable housing, which is nice, because they're putting people together, and you're not looking at people as this is the, you know, luxury apartment for rich people, and here's where the poor people live. They're just putting people together.
Absolutely.
So, and the other thing I'd say, I mean, Morristown, I think, is doing a good job of this, in Mount Laurel, putting housing in parking lots at the mall, shopping centers that have gone out of business. They're
Yes.
using land instead of leaving it as, you know, blighted town
Yes, yes.
sections, and putting housing there, which is good for everybody, I think.
Amen. I could not agree with you more. And that's another place where if you're in this town and if they have open meetings about it where you can be participating.
Yes.
If somebody comes and says, no, that's not the right zoning and I'm worried about that apartment complex, we need folks to say, we really need this housing for our firefighters, for our family, for any number of these people. So again, this is something, if you're not feeling inspired to go to those meetings, I get it, they're not gonna be like super exciting. But if you are and you want something to do that's local, this is a really good place to go and say, no, you don't have to be like, yes, in my backyard, you can. But just giving it a fair shake and saying, is this old gas station really, that's abandoned and been graffitied, really that much better than an apartment complex? I think it's worth having that. So thank you so much. Please.
Yeah, I work with a nonprofit that does affordable housing for older adults as part of
Yeah.
our work. And the wraparound services of we have a social work team. HUD has gotten rid of those requirements for wraparound services.
Okay.
Which leaves, you know, in communities where the needs for social workers, the needs for people to help assist benefits is so great. So the simple way, for instance, do you all have kind of the wraparound support of social workers and other things? And then, you know, I think that's one of the other things to advocate for is the restoration of those requirements, because you put people in difficult situations where they're facing poverty and then not having the social network of support alongside of that is really difficult. So we've had some buildings that have, you know, fired social workers and gotten rid of them because it's no longer a requirement. And that's also having a huge impact on people's mental health and other things, so.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying it. And it's, I say it's like the one affordable housing that we have been able to build the whole way through is senior housing. Because I think, at least historically, folks have been in the way that my mindset works, which is we should be taking care of the folks who have worked this hard in and who are now vulnerable and need that kind of thing. So thank you for bringing that up. And I agree. My mother is in her 70s. I'm not going to say the exact age. She might be mad at me for that. But she's in her 70s. She's very capable. But one bad day, one thing could mean that she would need that kind of support. And I can't imagine her just like living alone and not having any kind of that connection. I would be here for her, but a lot of folks don't have that. So absolutely, I agree. You're actually educating me on this one. I didn't realize that they'd gotten rid of that requirement. That's ridiculous. Absolutely agreed, and absolutely agreed that we need to have those there and that folks need that service. It's like the one that when I worked with folks in the shelter system, it was like the one thing that I could guarantee is if they got to 62, I could house them. It was, if you were just homeless all that time and you made it to 62, I could get you a placement within about 6 months, because that was the one kind of housing we were building enough of. Or building more of, I'm not gonna say enough of. You probably know better than I on that one. Thank you so much for sharing that.
We just thank you so much, Ed.
Thank you.
Julian, for coming along also. I'm sure you have your own stories that you could share, but thank you for challenging us. Thank you for informing us, and please sign up if you want more information. We have a lot of great speakers coming up, including someone who's here with us. Tim Woody's gonna be speaking in a couple of weeks in March about the mental health of first responders.
Heck yes.
So you're mentioning the firefighters and the police looking for housing. Well, he's got another angle that he's gonna be presenting on that.
Please, yes, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Sign up, take some time to chat, and we will see you in 2 weeks for our next speaker, who is Keisha Taylor, talking about career readiness.
Amazing.
Thank
Awesome.
you so much.
Thank you so much.